The morning began like any other in the Sol system. From the deserts of old Earth to the shining cities that floated above the clouds, everything was calm. Humanity had finally reached an age of peace, and no wars, no hunger, no chaos. For the first time in history, every nation stood under one flag, the United Earth Alliance. And at its heart stood one man, the world's first chosen leader of Earth, a man who had become a symbol of hope, unity, and calm strength. He wasn't just a politician. He was a reminder that humans could change. People trusted him because he never acted superior to anyone. He had walked among miners, farmers, and even soldiers in the farthest colonies. His words carried weight not because of power, but because of honesty. That morning he was preparing to address the entire galaxy from an orbital station called Horizon 1. It was a massive structure that floated in silent orbit around Earth's moon. It's a shining bridge of light connecting humans with the Galactic Council, a network of advanced alien civilizations who had accepted Earth as a member just a few years before. The speech was meant to mark a new era, a future where humans and alien species would finally work together without fear or pride. Billions were watching the live broadcast from their homes, ships, and colonies. Inside the command deck of Horizon 1, the mood was full of excitement. Scientists, diplomats, and military officers moved around calmly, checking systems, adjusting communication frequencies, and preparing for the global transmission. The leader stood near a large observation window, looking at the blue planet far below. He smiled faintly. "We've come so far," he said quietly. "Let's hope they see the best in us." The countdown began. 10 seconds to broadcast. 9, 8, 7. All systems were stable. The signal reached the Galactic Council's main communication hubs across several star systems. Millions of alien ambassadors, soldiers, and leaders tuned in. Humanity was about to speak, not as newcomers, but as equals. Then the camera light turned red. The leader took a calm breath, placed his hand on the podium, and began. "My friends across the stars, today humanity extends its hand not in conquest, but in cooperation. We have learned from our past." The sentence was never finished. A blinding flash tore through the background of the live feed. For a fraction of a second, the broadcast flickered. Then it went silent. The next moment, the entire feed cut to static. Billions of viewers froze. They thought it was a glitch, maybe a communication failure. But deep in the control centers on Earth, alarm lights started flashing red. Transmission lost. Station offline. Within seconds, every global network was buzzing. News anchors tried to speak, but no one had information. Then came the confirmation. Horizon 1 had vanished from radar. No debris, no signal, no life signs. It was as if the massive station had simply disappeared. People across Earth stood in disbelief. The leader was gone. So were hundreds of the planet's most important diplomats and scientists. Shock turned to panic, and panic slowly turned to silence. The kind of silence that happens when the heart doesn't want to accept what the mind already knows. But inside Earth's defense network, specialists were already digging into data. They found something. Fragments of unusual radiation right before the explosion. It wasn't from any known human technology. The energy pattern matched a signature belonging to an alien species, the Varan Empire, one of the most powerful members of the Galactic Council. The discovery changed everything. The Council released a public statement within hours, calling it a tragic accident. They claimed a malfunction in Horizon 1's energy core had caused a catastrophic failure. They offered their condolences, promised investigations, and urged calm. But on Earth, very few believed them. The radiation data was too specific, too clean. Someone had wanted this to happen. In the following days, the mood on Earth shifted completely. The streets were filled with silent gatherings, not protests, not riots, but moments of mourning. People placed candles under holographic banners showing the leader's last smile before the broadcast. Children held flags. Soldiers stood with heads bowed. No one shouted. No one cursed. Humanity didn't react with wild anger. It reacted with something colder. Determination. Behind the scenes, Earth's leaders met in a secret chamber deep beneath the lunar surface, a hidden facility known as the Argent Dome. The air inside was heavy. Generals, scientists, and advisors sat around a large circular table. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, one of the senior officers broke the silence. "They think they can erase him and call it an accident." Another voice, calm but firm, replied, "They didn't erase him. They just woke something they don't understand." For years, humans had followed the Galactic Council's rules. No large-scale weapon construction, no territorial expansion, no experiments with high-energy drives. It had been a time of peace, yes, but also of restraint. Earth had accepted those limits to prove it could be trusted. But now, trust was gone. Evidence gathered by intelligence ships confirmed the suspicion. A stealth craft of Varan design had been detected near Horizon 1 just hours before the explosion. That craft never returned to its base. The data trail vanished within the Council's secure channels. To the few who saw the classified files, there was no more doubt. The assassination had been planned, and so began the silent preparation. Factories once used for colonization projects were converted overnight. Old military stations that had been closed for decades suddenly came alive. Engineers worked around the clock under the name of Project Dawn. No one outside the command knew what it was, but whispers spread. Some said it was a reconstruction project. Others believed it was the birth of something greater. Back on Earth, the people waited. They didn't demand revenge, but they wanted answers. They wanted the truth. And while the Council kept releasing soft statements of sorrow and unity, the truth became clearer by the day. Unity meant nothing if justice didn't exist. In the shadows of the lunar facility, one of the scientists looked at a projection of Horizon 1's last recorded moments. There, hidden in the static of the transmission, was a pattern, a flash that wasn't part of the explosion. It was a coded signal, barely noticeable, almost like a message left behind. The scientist froze as he decoded it. It was the leader's voice just a few seconds before everything went dark. The message was simple. If they silence us, let Earth speak through action. That single line became the heartbeat of what would come next. It spread quietly through the networks, whispered in the training halls, printed on the sides of starships. It wasn't an order of war. It was a call for justice. Humanity didn't want chaos. It wanted the truth, and it wanted respect. But respect doesn't come through silence. By the end of that month, the Council noticed something strange. Earth's transmissions to their main relay stations had stopped. No diplomats were attending Council meetings. Trade ships were no longer requesting routes. The system seemed quiet, almost too quiet. Then, deep space scanners picked up large amounts of energy signatures near Mars' orbit. Activity far above normal. When questioned, Earth's official response was short. Routine upgrades. But those who had studied human history knew, when Earth went silent, it was never a good sign. Across the colonies, soldiers were recalled from peacekeeping missions. Old shipyards on Titan, Luna, and Ganymede lit up again. Millions of citizens volunteered for service, not out of hate, but out of pride. They wanted to protect what the leader had stood for. Peace through strength, not surrender. In the quiet of space, engineers stared at holographic blueprints of forgotten warships. Designs humanity had promised never to build again. One of them looked up and said softly, "He believed in peace, but to protect peace, we need to remind them what humans are capable of." The project was no longer called Dawn. It had a new name now, Rage Unleashed. Yet on the surface, Earth remained calm. There were no official threats, no declarations. To the galaxy, it looked like humanity was mourning. But deep within the shadows, under the light of the moon, a storm was forming, one that would change the galaxy forever. Because when the galaxy took away Earth's leader, it didn't destroy humanity's hope. It ignited it, and the stars, they were about to see what that hope truly meant. After the destruction of Horizon 1, the world changed in quiet ways first. There were no public uprisings, no official declarations, not even strong words from the new council on Earth. But something deeper was happening. Something that didn't make noise but carried far more power than words. People had lost their leader, and with him, they had lost a part of their hope. But grief has a strange way of changing humans. It can make them weak, or it can make them unstoppable. This time it was the second. Every home, every city, every station orbiting a planet carried the same silence. Workers still worked, children still went to school, but there was a shared thought in everyone's mind. Someone did this to us, and we will not let it be forgotten. In the underground meeting rooms of the lunar base, Earth's top minds gathered again. This was no ordinary meeting. Around the circular table sat leaders of science, defense, communication, and exploration, the people who had built humanity's modern age. The atmosphere was heavy with quiet anger and determination. The head of security placed a small device in the center of the table, projecting data above it, the energy readings from Horizon 1's final seconds. The readings were clear. The blast pattern didn't match any known human failure system. It wasn't an accident. It was a strike. A targeted one. A scientist leaned forward, frowning. That energy signature, he said slowly, matches the Varan Empire's defense pulse system, the kind used on their border fleets. The room went silent. For years, the Varan Empire had been a proud and powerful species in the Galactic Council. They were advanced, ancient, and often looked down on humanity as younglings, newcomers trying to act like equals. There had always been tension, but never open hostility. Still, if they had been behind this, it meant the galaxy's balance was built on lies. An old commander finally spoke, his voice low but firm. If the Council knows this and hides it, then they are no different. And that was the moment when everything changed. The decision was made not through shouting or arguments, but through the silence that followed. In that silence, everyone understood what had to be done. Operation Rage Unleashed was born that night, not as an act of revenge, but as a shield. Humanity would no longer depend on anyone else for its protection or dignity. The first step was information. Before acting, they needed proof. Earth's intelligence agencies began scanning old communication channels, decrypting old records and sending stealth drones deep into Council space. Every byte of data mattered. Every whisper from the stars was analyzed. Within weeks, they found the confirmation they had feared. A secret transmission, heavily encrypted, between high-ranking members of the Varan Empire and two representatives of the Galactic Council. The message was short but clear. The human leader's influence is growing too fast. Handle it before the next cycle. That was it. Proof, not a malfunction, not an accident, a plan. When this information reached Earth's leadership, there was no cheering, no panic, but only quiet resolve. They didn't release it to the galaxy. They didn't threaten or accuse anyone. They simply stored it, knowing one day they would reveal it at the right moment, not with words, but with undeniable strength. While the Council continued to send diplomatic letters and investigation updates, Earth focused on something else. Preparation. Across the solar system, old shipyards began to glow again. Massive rings around Mars and Titan, once silent relics from old wars, came alive with energy. Engineers returned from retirement. Pilots volunteered for testing programs. Civilian companies secretly switched production from cargo ships to armor plating and propulsion systems. At first, it looked like reconstruction. But those who paid attention could sense the truth. Humanity was building something large. The factories on Earth began producing advanced materials never seen before. Lightweight alloys, energy shields, plasma reactors. Entire production lines were redirected under classified government orders. And while the galaxy still thought humanity was mourning, Earth was quietly preparing for a storm. But this wasn't just about machines or ships. It was about people. On the surface, life went on, but everywhere the spirit had changed. In universities, young scientists studied faster than ever before. In training academies, new recruits trained harder, driven not by hate but by purpose. Everyone felt they had a role to play. Even artists and journalists joined the movement, writing, painting, and creating works dedicated to unity and strength. A popular saying began spreading across the colonies. He united us in peace. They'll unite us in purpose. It wasn't about one man anymore. It was about what he represented, humanity's place in the stars. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council grew uneasy. Their spies reported unusual activity around Earth's orbits, but nothing they could confirm as military expansion. When they tried to question Earth's delegates, the response was polite and calm, just rebuilding after the tragedy. But deep inside, every member of the Council knew humanity had stopped trusting them. One by one, human diplomats began withdrawing from Council meetings. Earth's representatives refused to vote on major galactic policies. The message was subtle but clear. We no longer play your game. Inside Earth's main command center, progress reports arrived daily. The engineers were rebuilding entire fleets, hundreds of ships once mothballed after the old wars. But these weren't just being reactivated. They were being transformed with new systems, faster engines, and stronger defenses. In one of the lunar bays, a massive ship stood almost complete. It was larger than any vessel humanity had ever built before, its hull black as space, its edges glowing faintly with blue light. The workers called it silent justice. It wasn't a weapon. It was a statement. At the same time, across the colonies, secret communication networks connected scientists and officers. They shared ideas, new propulsion drives, upgraded reactors, shield matrices. Innovation spread like wildfire. It was as if the entire human race had decided to evolve overnight. But even with all the progress, the leadership remained careful. They didn't want open war. They didn't want destruction. They wanted to be ready, so that no one would ever dare take from humanity again. In private messages sent through encrypted channels, Earth's new council spoke about what they called the line. It was a boundary, a point that, once crossed, would trigger the full reveal of humanity's new power. For now, they stayed silent, waiting for the right moment. Among the people, stories began spreading. Some said the leader's last speech, and the one that had been cut short, contained a secret code, a hidden message. Others believed his words before the explosion were prophetic. Let Earth speak through action. Those words became a guiding light. People printed them on posters, painted them on walls, and etched them onto ships. It was no longer just about revenge. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity's patience had limits, and that peace didn't mean weakness. Months passed, and the galaxy began to notice changes. Trade ships returning from human colonies reported fleets training in deep space. Cargo freighters were escorted by heavily armed patrols. And somewhere in the dark, the Council started to realize humanity was not preparing to beg. It was preparing to stand, yet Earth said nothing. No warnings, no threats. Just silence. That silence scared the Council more than any army ever could, because no one knew what Earth was truly planning, or how far they were willing to go. In hidden observatories beyond Neptune, human scouts tracked Council fleets moving closer to Sol space. They didn't engage. They just watched, recording every movement, every signal, every piece of data. Information was power now, and humanity had become very good at collecting it. Back on Earth, the night sky looked peaceful. Families still gathered to watch the stars, unaware that just beyond those shining lights, plans were being made that would change their future forever. Humanity was building not just ships, but destiny. The engineers, soldiers, and leaders all shared one belief: that peace must be protected not by promises, but by strength. They didn't want domination or war. They wanted freedom. Freedom from manipulation, from betrayal, from being treated as the galaxy's lesser race. And somewhere, beneath the cold glow of the moon, a quiet voice echoed in the command halls of the Argent Dome. They thought they could silence one man and break the spirit of a planet. Instead, they gave birth to something far greater, the united will of humanity. The preparations were almost complete. The fleets were awakening. The old flags were being raised again. But still, Earth waited, watching, listening, because when humanity finally spoke, it would not be through words. It would be through power, calm, measured, and unstoppable. And when that day came, the galaxy would remember. You can destroy a man, but you cannot destroy the reason he inspired billions to stand as one. The silence didn't last forever. After months of mourning and preparation, the solar system began to hum again, quietly at first, like a whisper spreading through space. What began as secret research projects had now turned into something far greater. Humanity wasn't just rebuilding, it was awakening. On the far side of the moon, hundreds of massive construction platforms surrounded half-finished ships. Each one looked different, some old, some new, some still covered in scaffolding and robotic arms. The hum of engines, welding sparks, and the rhythm of machines filled the airless void. To outsiders, it was hidden behind cloaking fields and communication silence. But to those working there, it was history being written in real time. Inside the main control deck of the lunar shipyard, engineers watched as massive energy cores were lowered into the heart of a new warship. The core glowed like a small sun, lighting up the metallic hull from within. Someone whispered, "It's alive," and everyone smiled. That simple sentence carried hope, power, and pride. These weren't weapons of destruction. They were shields of survival, built not for conquest but for the promise that no one would ever harm Earth again. Back on Earth, the mood was changing too. People no longer looked up at the night sky with sadness. Now they looked up with anticipation. There was a feeling, hard to describe, that something big was coming. They didn't know what, but they could feel it. Across cities, holographic billboards displayed a simple message. For the lost. For the truth. For humanity. In schools, students learned not just history, but the lessons of unity. Teachers told stories of how their leader had once stood against doubt and guided the world toward peace. And now, that peace had become the reason for their strength. Meanwhile, inside the Argent Dome on the moon, meetings continued. The walls of the underground base were lined with glowing maps, projections of solar routes, shipyard statuses, and coded messages. The air was thick with focus. Phase 2 is complete, one of the strategists said. All major shipyards are operational. Civilian contractors have been reassigned to the Mars division. The Titan reactors are online, a calm voice replied. Good, now we begin the awakening. And that phrase, the awakening, became the new heartbeat of Earth. Out in the asteroid belt near a cluster of mining colonies, entire factories had been converted into ship assembly lines. Old cargo haulers were stripped down and rebuilt into heavy cruisers. Civilian engineers worked side by side with former soldiers. They didn't ask many questions and they just worked. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about readiness. In the orbit of Mars, something extraordinary was happening. Massive ship skeletons floated in perfect formation, connected by cranes and docking tubes. Thousands of workers moved like ants across their surfaces. Each section was being upgraded with new technologies developed in secret over the past decade. Plasma shielding, hyperwave propulsion, and smart AI navigation that could pilot a ship even through uncharted regions. Every day, the number of completed ships grew. Small scouts, massive carriers, agile interceptors, and all waiting quietly under black code names. No records, no broadcasts, nothing leaked beyond the solar system. Still, rumors began to reach other worlds. Some traders whispered of strange metallic shapes moving beyond Neptune. Others said human freighters carried unknown equipment to the moons of Jupiter. The Galactic Council dismissed it as speculation, but the unease had begun to spread. While the galaxy wondered, Earth stayed silent. But silence is often louder than words. Deep beneath the Arctic ice on Earth, a hidden facility known as the Boreal Core was running around the clock. Inside, scientists worked on a single goal, perfecting the energy reactors that would power the new fleet. These reactors didn't rely on standard plasma or fusion technology. They used something new, an adaptive energy core designed to last for centuries without maintenance. It was clean, stable, and powerful, proof that humanity could surpass what even the oldest alien civilizations had achieved. One of the engineers, staring at the glowing core, said softly, he dreamed of a better future. Maybe this is what he meant. Outside, snowstorms covered the surface, hiding any sign of what was happening below. Humanity's greatest work was being built in silence, beneath its own planet's ice. At the same time, Earth's communication systems were completely redesigned. The old network, which had relied on the Galactic Council's relays, was replaced by a new one, fully independent, faster, and impossible to track. Now messages between colonies, moons, and ships could move without interception. For the first time, humanity was truly free to speak and to act on its own terms. As the fleets grew, so did the people's sense of pride. Citizens across the colonies began holding gatherings, not protests, not rallies, but moments of remembrance. They projected holograms of their lost leader, played his old speeches, and spoke about his vision. One sentence, from his very first speech after the unification of Earth, kept echoing everywhere. Peace is not the absence of strength. It is the wisdom to know when to use it. Those words became the silent anthem of the new age. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council continued its politics. They still debated trade routes, border tensions, and laws, pretending everything was normal. But even they couldn't ignore the growing signs that Earth had changed. Its representatives no longer sent reports. Its trade agreements were quietly ending. And the few ships that traveled to Earth returned with stories they couldn't quite explain. One pilot claimed to have seen an entire armada near the edge of the Kuiper Belt, ships with no identification codes, moving in absolute formation. Another swore he saw light distortions, as if hundreds of cloaked vessels were stationed beyond Pluto. The Council dismissed these as fabrications, but inside their chambers, fear was slowly building. They had underestimated humanity once before. They wouldn't do it again. Back in Sol System, the final tests began. The new fleets were divided into divisions: exploration, defense, and recovery. The biggest ships, called Guardians, were the pride of the program. Each one was designed to carry thousands of people and defend entire planets if necessary. Smaller strike craft were built to escort them, fast and agile. The engineers worked tirelessly, adjusting systems, calibrating reactors, and testing warp drives. Every successful test was another heartbeat of progress. But among the workers there was no arrogance, no talk of war. They were proud, but they were careful. Everyone knew what was at stake. Humanity's goal wasn't to dominate. It was to prove it could never be silenced again. On Earth, the council chambers were lit late into the night. The leaders stood around a holographic map of the solar system. Blue dots, representing completed ships, filled the display. The map looked almost alive, pulsing softly with energy. "It's almost time," someone said quietly. Another replied, "Not yet. Let them think we are still grieving. The quieter we are, the stronger the message will be when we finally speak." That night, the skies above Earth lit up with hundreds of faint streaks of light, small ships leaving orbit for test flights. People came out of their homes to watch. Children pointed at the glowing trails and asked their parents what they were. "Just stars moving," one parent said softly, smiling. But deep down they knew those weren't stars. That was the future taking shape. Weeks turned into months. The fleets grew stronger, more coordinated. Crews trained together in secret simulations, learning to operate in perfect harmony. Artificial gravity systems were refined, weapon systems fine-tuned, and communication lines perfected. In one training session near Jupiter, a young pilot said over the comms, "We're flying for him, for what he stood for." The reply came from another voice, firm and calm. "No, we're flying for all of us now." It wasn't just a military buildup anymore. It was a transformation of an entire species. As humanity's new fleet stretched across the void, their reflection glimmered faintly against the distant stars. From the shadows of history, from centuries of struggle, humanity had risen again, quieter, wiser, stronger, and though no one declared it, everyone knew what this moment meant. This was not the beginning of war. This was the end of fear. When the galaxy had taken away their leader, it believed it had broken their spirit. But all it had done was teach them how to unite without needing anyone's permission. In the silence of space, the newly built ships floated in formation, their lights blinking softly, engines ready, crews waiting for the call. The name of their mission was painted across each hull in the same glowing script: for the lost, for the future, for Earth. And somewhere in that vast emptiness, a whisper echoed across the fleet. Words carried by radio, spoken by no one and everyone at once. He dreamed of peace. "We'll make sure the stars remember why." Humanity's fleets had awakened, and the galaxy was about to feel the calm before the storm. The long silence that had surrounded Earth finally began to break. Out in deep space, a quiet signal left the solar system, a small pulse of blue light that vanished almost instantly. It wasn't a message of words, only coordinates, and that signal meant one thing: it was time. For almost a year, humanity had stayed hidden, working in silence, watching from the shadows. The fleets were complete now. Thousands of ships ready across the solar system, waiting for one order. The soldiers, scientists, and pilots had all trained for this moment, but even now no one spoke of war. They spoke of justice. The memory of their lost leader still lingered like a guiding light. His voice, his calm tone, his belief that peace should never come at the cost of dignity, those words echoed in every heart. Humanity wasn't seeking revenge. It was seeking truth. The target was chosen carefully. It wasn't a city nor a world. It was a secret Varan research base hidden on the edge of Council space, the same place from where the coded assassination signal had been sent. It was guarded, heavily protected, and officially didn't even exist on any galactic map. For the first time in history, a full human fleet left the solar system under total silence. No signals, no identification, just cold calculated movement through the dark. The fleet moved like a single body, sleek ships gliding through the emptiness, engines glowing faintly blue. From a distance, they looked like shooting stars. Inside, the crew sat quietly at their stations, hands steady, eyes calm. They all knew what this mission meant. Far behind, in Earth's command center, a single light blinked on the main display, a small green dot showing the fleet's status. The room was silent. No cheering, no excitement, only focus. Humanity had waited too long for this moment to waste it on emotion. As the fleet approached the outer edge of Council territory, sensors detected the Varan defense grid. It was massive, hundreds of automated stations guarding the sector. Any normal ship would have been stopped instantly, but humanity's new technology wasn't normal. Every vessel carried advanced cloaking fields and adaptive shields. The ships moved past the sensors like shadows, completely unseen. For the first time, alien systems built to monitor entire sectors failed to detect even a whisper. Inside the lead ship, the commander looked out of the viewing glass at the distant stars. In the distance, a faint shimmer marked the enemy outpost. The crew around him waited for his signal, but he didn't rush. He wanted to be sure. Every movement, every action had to be clean, disciplined, and honorable. "Lock the coordinates," he said quietly. "Begin transmission to Earth. Let them know we've arrived." The signal reached home in less than a second. On Earth, deep inside the Argent Dome, the main screen came alive. Everyone stood as the feed displayed the image of the fleet holding position near the Varan border. The sight was breathtaking. Hundreds of ships perfectly aligned, engines burning softly against the stars. For a brief moment, humanity's leaders didn't speak. They simply watched, proud, silent, and aware of what this moment represented. Then, the final command was sent. Proceed. The fleet advanced. Within minutes, the Varan defense systems started detecting distortions. Their computers struggled to analyze what was happening. Unknown readings appeared, then vanished. Before the operators could react, their systems froze, disabled by electromagnetic pulses designed not to destroy, but to disarm. The human fleet's approach was calm and surgical. In orbit above the Varan outpost, alarms began to sound. The guards looked out their windows into space and saw something they had never seen before. Hundreds of dark shapes emerging from the shadows, forming a wall of light and metal. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't fury. It was precision. One by one, the outpost systems went offline. Power grids shut down, communication towers went dark, and defense turrets froze in mid-motion. The entire base was surrounded, completely cut off from the galaxy. Inside the outpost, the alien commander tried to send a distress signal, but nothing worked. All frequencies were jammed, yet no weapon fire came. The humans didn't attack. They simply waited, silent, powerful, and present. Then a single message appeared on every screen inside the base. It was written in clear galactic common language. "We know what you did." The Varan soldiers stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Before they could act, their central core, the archive containing years of secret records, began transmitting automatically. The humans had hacked the system. Within minutes, the entire database was copied, encrypted, and transferred to Earth. And just like that, it was over. The human fleet disappeared back into the void as quietly as it had arrived. No one was harmed. No structures were destroyed. But the message had been delivered. When the data reached Earth, the evidence was undeniable. Every transmission, every order, every payment that had funded the assassination, it was all there. The Galactic Council's involvement was clear. They had seen humanity rise too quickly, too united, and they feared it. Now the truth was in human hands. The Council, realizing the outpost had gone silent, panicked. They sent scouts to investigate, but when their ships arrived, they found nothing. The station was intact but empty, every piece of data erased, every file gone. No sign of battle, no sign of an intruder. It was as if the humans had never been there. Rumors began to spread through the galaxy. Some said the humans had developed invisible fleets. Others said Earth had learned how to manipulate space itself. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. The Council could no longer ignore humanity. Back home, the recovered data was analyzed for days. The evidence was shared only among the highest ranks of command. When they confirmed its authenticity, a decision had to be made: reveal it or hold it. After long debate, Earth chose silence once again. They would not reveal the truth yet. The galaxy wasn't ready, but they would be prepared for the reaction that was surely coming. In the following weeks, the Varin Empire accused Earth of espionage. The Council called for explanations. Yet every time they demanded answers, Earth's response was calm and consistent. We have nothing to hide. Behind that calm face, however, humanity was already moving to the next step. The new fleets were reorganized into defense sectors across the solar system. Massive stations were built along the outer planets, observation posts, trade points, and shield arrays. To the public, it looked like development for exploration. But in truth, every station was part of a unified defense network. Still, humanity never threatened. Instead, they began sending small aid missions to independent colonies that had been neglected by the Council. Medical ships, energy transports, and humanitarian fleets started arriving at distant worlds where the Council had lost influence. Those colonies welcomed the help with open arms. Slowly, humanity's image began to shift. No longer seen as newcomers or the young race, they were now respected, even admired, for their discipline and compassion. While the Council argued in chambers, humanity acted. While others built politics, humanity built trust. And this quiet rise scared the powerful more than any war ever could. Across the stars, whispers spread of a phrase that sent chills through the Council's halls. Earth remembers. Even those who hadn't been part of the old betrayal began to fear what that meant. Because they knew, one day humanity would stop being quiet. And when it did, the galaxy would listen. On Earth, the people continued to live their lives. Children grew up hearing stories of courage, not war. Workers built ships not out of anger, but out of duty. Every citizen understood that peace had to be protected, and protection required strength. One evening in the orbit of Mars, the commander of the First Fleet stood on the observation deck of his ship. He watched as the sun rose over the red planet, lighting the metal hulls of hundreds of ships around him. For a long time he said nothing. Then he whispered to himself, he would have been proud. Back on Earth, in a small museum dedicated to the lost leader, visitors left flowers and holographic candles. In front of his statue, a single line was carved in shining metal. He taught us peace. They taught us strength. The galaxy didn't know it yet, but this quiet victory, this small act of justice here, had already changed everything. Humanity had proven that power didn't always mean violence and justice didn't always mean destruction. They had spoken without shouting, acted without boasting, and reminded everyone that silence, when backed by purpose, could be the loudest sound in the universe. But even as the people of Earth celebrated their unity, the Council was restless. Their spies had failed. Their systems had been breached. Their power was slipping. And somewhere deep in their hidden chambers, a few of them whispered the words no one wanted to hear. If they could do this without firing a single shot, what else are they capable of? That question would echo across the galaxy for years, because Earth had just drawn a line, invisible, quiet, and absolute. And from that day forward, every starfaring civilization understood one simple truth: humanity might forgive, but it would never forget. Years had passed since the silent mission that changed everything. The galaxy had almost returned to its usual rhythm. Trade routes open, diplomatic talks moving, and the Council trying to maintain its image of authority. But something subtle had shifted. Wherever one traveled in the stars, the name Earth carried a new kind of weight. It wasn't the weight of fear. It was the weight of respect. In the far corners of the galaxy, small colonies began to hang blue and white flags, Earth's symbol of unity, beside their own. People had started to speak of how the humans had come quietly, helped and left without asking for anything in return. When mining ships were stranded or outposts ran out of air, it was often a human ship that arrived first. To the Council, this growing admiration was dangerous. They had spent decades shaping the galaxy through control, laws, taxes, trade permissions, and now a new kind of influence was spreading beyond their reach. An influence built not on fear or politics, but on simple trust. Inside Earth's own system, progress had moved faster than anyone imagined. The colonies around Mars and Jupiter had become cities glowing under transparent domes. The moon, once just gray rock, was now covered in shining towers, shipyards, and green parks. Humanity had learned from its past mistakes. Every project, every invention was designed to serve people, not power. The loss of their leader had changed them deeply. It had united governments, corporations, and citizens under one silent promise. Never again would greed or ego decide humanity's fate. Every person, from engineers to teachers, felt part of something greater. And among them there was one group that stood apart, the Fleet Guardians. They were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They were explorers, protectors, and peacekeepers. They trained not just in battle, but in diplomacy, engineering, and rescue operations. Their ships carried both weapons and medical bays. Their uniforms carried no ranks, only symbols of responsibility. Their leader, a quiet, thoughtful man who rarely spoke in public, believed that the true strength of humanity was not in firepower, but in the ability to rebuild, to forgive, and to adapt. He often told his crews, "We don't conquer space. We care for it." Under his command, the Guardians became legends. They visited forgotten colonies, helped rebuild alien habitats destroyed by storms, and restored trade between planets that had once been enemies. Everywhere they went, they left behind hope, and a quiet reminder that Earth remembered what loss felt like. But beyond the kindness, humanity never forgot its readiness. Deep under the surface of the moon, hidden within black stone tunnels, massive defense systems waited, silent, unarmed, and unseen. They were not meant to start a war, only to ensure that one would never reach Earth again. In those days, the galaxy was changing fast. New alliances were forming outside the Council's reach. Worlds that had once bowed under Council pressure now looked to Earth for balance. It was as if humanity had become the center of an invisible circle, not by intention, but by the gravity of its actions. However, not everyone welcomed that change. Far away, the Council began holding secret meetings. Reports from their spies spoke of human technology far beyond expected levels. Ships capable of traveling faster than light, energy systems that could power whole planets, and artificial intelligences that could think, create, and feel empathy. The Council didn't understand it, and that scared them. One of their advisors suggested reopening communication with Earth to ease tensions, but others disagreed. They still saw humanity as unpredictable, too emotional, too independent. "They don't play by the rules," one of the elders said bitterly. "They rewrite them." So they began working in shadows again, not with assassins this time, but with influence. They spread quiet rumors that humans were secretly building a weapon to control minds. They claimed Earth's ships were gathering data on every civilization. They tried to turn the galaxy's trust into fear, and for a short time it worked. A few colonies began to distance themselves. Old suspicions reawakened. In trade stations and public networks, debates started. Was Earth truly peaceful, or was it simply preparing to rule? Human leaders noticed the change, but they didn't rush to respond. They knew that words would not erase lies. Instead, they continued doing what they had always done: help where it was needed, speak only through action. Then, one event changed everything again. A solar storm hit a distant mining world in the Varan Empire, the same species that had been involved in Earth's leader's assassination years ago. The storm was catastrophic. Communications failed, cities lost power, and millions were trapped. The Council offered help but said it would take weeks to reach the planet. Earth reacted instantly. Within hours, a massive fleet of aid ships left human space. Not warships, but carriers loaded with food, medical drones, and portable power units. They crossed entire sectors in record time and reached the Varan world within days. For the first time in history, human and Varan citizens stood side by side, not as enemies but as survivors helping each other. The humans didn't bring speeches or demands. They brought hands to lift rubble, doctors to heal, and engineers to restore power. When the Council finally arrived weeks later, they were met by crowds cheering, not for them, but for the humans who had saved their lives. The scene was broadcast across the galaxy, and no rumor could survive it. That day, a quiet truth became impossible to deny. Humanity had changed the meaning of power. Back on Earth, people didn't celebrate. They simply smiled, proud but humble. They knew this wasn't a victory over anyone. It was a victory for what their leader had always believed in, that true strength comes from helping others stand again. Over the next few years, Earth became a center for cooperation. Old rivalries between species began to fade as human diplomats created the first open trade networks, free of council taxes. New stations were built, massive circular hubs floating between systems, where any species could trade, learn and share knowledge without politics. At the heart of one such hub stood a tall spire, glowing with blue light. It was named the Beacon. Inside it, the galaxy's languages were translated in real time, and anyone, from the smallest colony worker to the richest ambassador, could speak freely. The beacon became a symbol of what the galaxy could be, and humanity stood quietly at its center, never claiming ownership, only guidance. Still, not everyone could let go of old wounds. Deep within the council, a few hardliners refused to accept humanity's rise. They saw kindness as manipulation and peace as strategy. They began forming plans once more, not direct attacks, but traps of reputation. They tried to frame Earth in data leaks, blame them for political collapses, and spread false reports about stolen technologies. But every time the truth came out, every lie collapsed under the sheer transparency of Earth's actions. The Council began to fracture. Younger species began leaving it altogether, choosing to align themselves with the New Earth Coalition, a loose alliance built on trust, not rules. It wasn't an empire. It was a family of worlds choosing to cooperate freely, and as that alliance grew, humanity's influence became unstoppable. The galaxy started to evolve around a new idea, not one of domination or survival, but of purpose. Humanity had reminded everyone that peace was not weakness and that justice could come without revenge. Yet beneath all the progress, there was still a quiet unease. Humanity had achieved what no species ever had: unity, compassion, and unmatched technology, all within a few decades. Some whispered that they were becoming something more than human, that their connection to machines, nature, and emotion had created a new kind of being. But those on Earth didn't see it that way. To them, it wasn't about becoming something greater. It was about staying true to what they had always been: people who dream, love, and protect. Late one night, high above the planet in the orbital ring, a young technician looked out at the stars. The Earth glowed below, beautiful and calm. Around it, tiny dots of light, human ships, moved in perfect harmony. He turned to his mentor and asked softly, "Do you think they still hate us out there?" The older man smiled gently. "Maybe some do," he said. "But that doesn't matter. Hate fades. What lasts is what we build. Down on the surface, in a quiet memorial garden where flowers from 100 worlds grew, visitors still came to honor the one who had started it all, the leader whose death had united an entire species." The air was calm, the stars clear, and a simple line was carved into the stone wall nearby. "They took one life. We built a future." Those words carried through every human heart, every mission, and every world touched by Earth's kindness. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It never had been. It was about showing that humanity could face darkness and still choose light. And somewhere far beyond the stars, even those who once plotted against Earth began to realize that the human story was no longer about survival. It was about evolution, not of machines, not of empires, but of spirit. Humanity had become the quiet heartbeat of the galaxy, strong, steady, and unbreakable. Time passed, but the galaxy never truly returned to what it once was. The stars still burned, trade ships still crossed the void, and the council still held their meetings, but everyone knew something had changed forever. The balance that had existed for centuries was gone. A new center of gravity had appeared: Earth. At first, humanity never wanted to lead. They never set out to rule the galaxy. They only wanted to protect themselves and live in peace. But as the years went on, more and more worlds began to look toward Earth for guidance, for fairness, for hope. When disputes broke out between alien colonies, they didn't go to the council anymore. They went to Earth. The once silent planet that had been underestimated and betrayed had become the voice of reason in a restless galaxy. But even with this new role, humans stayed humble. They built no throne, no empire, and no crown. Instead, they built bridges, literally and symbolically. Space corridors linked different worlds, allowing species that had never met to trade, talk, and understand one another. It was something no one had believed possible. At the heart of this change was something simple: trust. Humanity had earned it not by fear or force, but through patience and compassion. Still, under all this progress, a quiet awareness remained. The galaxy's peace was fragile, and shadows were never truly gone. Far from the shining centers of trade, in the deep black corners of space, small factions of old power still lingered. People who had once thrived under the Council's control. They whispered to each other, planning how to restore their influence. To them, Earth's rise was an insult. How could a world once considered primitive now command such respect? But every plan they made fell apart. The reason was simple. The galaxy had changed, and so had humanity. The humans didn't just have technology or fleets. They had something far more powerful: unity. Every citizen, from the smallest mining worker to the highest commander, believed in the same purpose. They worked not for reward but for the future. On Earth itself, cities stretched toward the sky, built from silver and glass, surrounded by forests and clean oceans. Artificial suns lit the dark poles, creating gardens where ice once ruled. Spaceports hung above the planet like bright halos, sending and receiving ships every hour. Children studied the stars in school not as distant mysteries, but as places they might one day visit. Elders shared stories of the time before unity, reminding everyone that peace had been paid for dearly. Among them walked people who still remembered the day their leader had been lost, the day everything changed. They spoke of it not with anger but with pride. It made us who we are, they would say. It taught us what matters. And while humanity moved forward, the rest of the galaxy slowly began to follow. New councils formed, this time with no single species in charge. Each planet had a voice, and the meetings were open for all to see. It was called the Assembly of Worlds, and Earth was its heart. The first session of the assembly was held in orbit around Jupiter. The sight was breathtaking. Hundreds of ships from every known species gathered around a massive silver station that glowed softly against the gas giant's orange clouds. Inside, delegates from across the stars took their seats around a circular hall, all equal, all under the same light. When the time came for humanity to speak, there was no grand speech. A single representative stood up and said simply, "We were once divided, afraid, and angry, but we learned that the stars don't care for pride or power. They only reward those who care for one another. Let us remember that." No one clapped, no one cheered, but the silence that followed was full of meaning. Everyone understood, and that was how it began. A new era not ruled by fear but by shared strength. Yet even in peace, challenges remained. The galaxy was vast, and new species were being discovered beyond the known borders. Some were friendly, curious to learn. Others were cautious, remembering stories of wars long past. Humanity's task was never to control them, but to make sure that what had once happened to Earth never happened to anyone else. So the Fleet Guardians continued their mission, spreading across deep space not as conquerors but as watchers. They became symbols of balance. Their ships, painted in white and blue, carried the same message wherever they went: peace through presence. Each time a Guardian ship entered a system, locals knew help had arrived, not to interfere, but to protect. They helped repair stations, cure diseases, and calm conflicts before they began. For many civilizations, they became the line between chaos and order. But for humanity, their greatest victory wasn't in the stars. It was within themselves. They had learned that true power didn't come from technology or strength. It came from the courage to forgive, to grow, and to keep believing in goodness even when the universe gave reasons not to. Still, the memory of the past never faded completely. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in a quiet chamber surrounded by water and light, there stood a monument, not of war or destruction, but of unity. On it, the names of all who had fallen during the old conflict were written, both human and alien. At the center of the monument, a glowing circle pulsed gently, representing the heartbeat of the planet. It was said that this light would never go out as long as peace remained. Visitors from every world came there. Some prayed, some cried, and some simply stood in silence. They called it the core of memory. One day, as the monument's reflection shimmered across the water, a young historian asked an elder a question. "Do you think the galaxy will ever forget what happened?" The elder smiled softly and replied, Maybe someday. But forgetting isn't the point. Remembering is how we stay human. Those words spread quietly across networks and halls. They were simple, but they carried truth. Humanity had not risen to dominate. It had risen to remind the universe what it meant to care. Years later, on the anniversary of the leader's death, every ship in human space stopped for 1 minute. Engines went silent. Lights dimmed. Across the stars, from the smallest shuttle to the largest dreadnought, a moment of stillness filled the void. It wasn't just a tribute to the man who had died. It was a reminder of everything that came after. When the silence ended, the stars shone a little brighter. In the following centuries, people began to say that Earth's influence wasn't something that could be seen or measured. It was something that could be felt. A calmness when humans entered the room, a sense of safety when their ships appeared, a trust that had no need for proof. And yet humanity never grew arrogant. They still questioned, still doubted, still made mistakes, but they always corrected themselves, because they had learned the value of humility through pain. One of the last remaining council members, now old and weary, once visited Earth secretly. He walked among its people unnoticed and saw a world full of life, children laughing in gardens, machines working alongside humans, skies clear and blue. When he finally spoke to a group of locals, he asked, "Don't you fear losing all this one day?" A woman nearby smiled gently. "We don't live in fear anymore," she said. "We live in gratitude, and gratitude is stronger than fear." The old man left Earth that day without a word, but his eyes were wet. He had finally understood what the council never had, that strength wasn't in power or control. It was in the heart. And so, as time went on, the story of humanity became legend, not as conquerors, not as rebels, but as the species that changed the course of history simply by refusing to become like those who wronged them. Their leader's legacy lived on not in statues or wars, but in actions, in kindness offered without reward, in courage shown without expectation, and in unity built from shared pain. As the centuries passed, the galaxy continued to expand, and new civilizations were born. Many of them never knew the story of the assassination or the years of silence that followed. But every time a ship crossed the stars with the emblem of Earth, they felt something unexplainable. A warmth, a calm, a reassurance that they were not alone. That was humanity's gift to the universe, not dominance, but hope. And somewhere, deep among the constellations, a faint signal still echoed across the void, a heartbeat of light pulsing softly through the darkness. It wasn't a call for war or even remembrance. It was a promise that no matter how vast the galaxy became, no matter how many new empires rose and fell, there would always be one world that remembered what it meant to care, to forgive and to stand again, a world called Earth.